Hello, I'm Bakir Sanwan. You are watching A News Now. Let's take a look at today's top stories. The United States Senate advances a deal to reopen the government after 40 days of shutdown. The chair of the BBC apologizes for an error of judgment and resigns over a misleading documentary edit of Donald Trump. And the Battle of Pokrovsk continues as Russian forces make gains in Ukraine. After weeks of political gridlock and mounting frustration across the United States, there is finally movement in Washington, D.C. Senators have voted to advance a deal that could reopen the government after the record-breaking shutdown. Let's take a closer look at what this agreement means and what hurdles still remain.
The motion upon reconsideration is agreed to.
The United States Senate has taken a major step toward ending the longest government shutdown in the nation's history. After 40 days of deadlock, senators voted 60-40 on Sunday to advance a deal that would temporarily fund the government until the end of January. The agreement was reached between Republicans and a small group of Democrats who broke ranks with their party's leadership.
All will receive their back wages.
In exchange, Republicans agreed to hold a vote in December on extending key health insurance tax credits under the Affordable Care Act. Democrats consider this as a priority. However, some Democrats remain divided, arguing that the concessions win does not go far enough, while Republicans welcome the deal.
After 40 long days, I'm hopeful that we can finally bring the shutdown to an end. And I don't need to go over all the reasons why it's imperative that we get the government open as soon as possible. From the truly precarious situation we are in with regard to air travel to the fact that our staffs have been working without pay for a full 40 days now, all of us, Republicans and Democrats who support this bill, know that the time to act is now.
We asked President Trump to step in and meet with us to deliver lower health care for Americans, and instead, Donald Trump has taken the American people hostage, from cutting off food aid to hungry families and vets and seniors and kids, to manufacturing flight cancellations, to cutting off home heating aid, while he builds a billion-dollar ballroom with gold-plated toilets. Therefore, I must vote no. This healthcare crisis is so severe, so urgent, so devastating for families back home that I cannot in good faith support this CR that fails to address the healthcare crisis.
The partial shutdown has left about 1.4 million federal employees without pay and caused widespread disruption to public services, from food assistance to airport operations. The bill now heads to the House of Representatives, where it still faces debate before it can go to President Donald Trump for his signature.
Airlines cancelled more than 2,800 flights and delayed over 10,000 across the United States, the most disruptions on a single day since the government shutdown began. Major airlines were dealing with a third day of government-mandated flight cuts, along with rising air traffic controller absences, which has caused thousands of delays and cancellations. Delta Airlines was especially hard hit, cancelling or delaying 52% of its mainline flights on Sunday. Millions of people usually travel in the run-up to Thanksgiving, one of the most important U.S. holidays. The BBC chair has apologized for an error of judgment over the panorama edit of Trump's 2021 Capitol speech. BBC chiefs Tim Davie and Deborah Turness resigned over the controversy. Now, the U.S. president has sent a letter to the BBC threatening legal action, according to BBC News. The corporation confirmed it has received the letter and will respond in due course. Our Zainab Farizadeh has more on the story.
BBC Director General Tim Davie and BBC News CEO Deborah Turness have both resigned following a controversy over a panorama documentary about Donald Trump. It comes after the Telegraph revealed a leaked BBC memo claiming that the program edited parts of Trump's 2021 Capitol speech to make it look like he was encouraging the violence. In his speech in Washington, D.C. on 6 January 2021, Trump said, "We are going to walk down to the Capitol and we are going to cheer on our brave senators and congressmen and women." However, in the Panorama edit, he was shown saying, "We are going to walk down to the Capitol and I will be there with you. And we fight like hell." The two sections of the speech that were edited together were more than 50 minutes apart. The memo also criticized other areas of BBC News, including BBC Arabic's coverage of the Israel-Gaza war, and accused the broadcaster of systemic bias. In separate statements, Davey admitted there have been some mistakes, while Turners said, "The buck stops with me."
I would like to say it has been the privilege of my career to serve as the CEO of BBC News and to work with our brilliant team of journalists. I stepped down over the weekend because the buck stops with me. But I'd like to make one thing very clear. BBC News is not institutionally biased. That's why it's the world's most trusted news provider.
UK Culture Secretary Lisa Nandy, in a post on X, thanked Davey for his leadership of the BBC through a period of significant change, and US President Donald Trump welcomed the resignation on Trust Social, referring to the Panorama documentary about him, which has come under scrutiny. He says was a terrible thing for democracy. White House Press Secretary Caroline Leavitt on social media called the BBC 100% fake news and a propaganda machine. For now, there is no word on who will take over as BBC Director General. Zeynep Ferrerzadeh, A News, Manchester, United Kingdom.
Over to Ukraine, where Russian forces appear on the brink of seizing the eastern city of Pokrovsk, a symbolic prize President Vladimir Putin has sought for 21 months. Fighting has intensified in recent days. However, Kiev denies Ukrainian troops are surrounded. Let's take a look.
Russian strikes and fierce fighting on Ukraine's city of Pokrovsk in the Donetsk region are continuing. The Russian armies say they've repelled 7 attacks launched by the Ukrainian army from the northwest of Krasnoarmeysk and thwarted 8 attempts by the trapped Ukrainian army to break out to the north. However, Ukrainian troops claim progress in repelling Russian attempts, saying a total of 248 combat clashes took place on Sunday. Analysts say a Russian victory in Pokrovsk would open the way for further offensives on other cities in the Donetsk region, including Kramatorsk and Sloviansk. Before the war, the city had a population of about 60,000 and was a key industrial and transport hub in the Ukrainian-controlled part of Donbass. By the summer of 2025, only around 1,500 residents remained. Long viewed as a strategic city for Kyiv because of its road and rail links, it sits at the junction of several major routes leading to Donetsk in the east and Dnipro and Zaporizhia to the west. It's also played a crucial role in battlefield operations, serving as a supply line that supported Ukrainian logistics before these resources fanned out to smaller villages and frontline positions around the city. Frequent drone and artillery attacks on the main highway and rail line have forced Kyiv to seek alternative supply routes, shifting the logistical hub away from Pokrovsk, a significant gain for Russia.
And now, former French President Nicolas Sarkozy will be released from prison only 3 weeks into his 5-year prison sentence. Sarkozy was found guilty of allowing close collaborators and unofficial intermediaries to try to obtain funding from Muammar Gaddafi's regime in Libya for his 2007 presidential run. Sarkozy has appealed the verdict and continues to deny any wrongdoing. Iraqi authorities have tightened security ahead of the country's general election on Tuesday. Security forces were deployed around polling stations in Baghdad and other cities to ensure a safe voting process. Major General Tahsin al-Qajafi, spokesperson for the Iraqi Joint Operations Command, said that voters will be able to cast their ballots freely without pressure. This will be Iraq's sixth parliamentary election since the 2003 US-led invasion that overthrew Saddam Hussein. And 1 month after the ceasefire kicked in, life in Gaza remains difficult for many residents. Families are struggling to rebuild amid shortages of food, medicine and clean water. Prices for basic goods have soared, driven by limited supply and damaged infrastructure. While some markets have reopened and aid is trickling in, many Gazans say recovery feels distant, with daily life still marked by uncertainty and hardship.
Palestinians in southern Gaza are struggling to cope with soaring prices and an uncertain future, despite a month-long ceasefire between Hamas and Israel. In the streets of Khan Yunis, vendors continue their daily routines, preparing falafel, selling vegetables and baking bread. But many say survival is harder than ever.
The future is bleak and uncertain. Given our current situation, things remain as they are. Truce. No truce. We do not see a truce. The war is ongoing, and the horizon is dark. We see the country's situation as very difficult.
Financial strain continues to rise as food becomes increasingly unaffordable.
Everything is expensive. Nothing has gotten cheaper. But on the contrary, some things have become even more expensive than before. Regarding meat, meat is scarce here and extremely expensive. As for vegetables, naturally, vegetables and fruits, avocados and everything else are all expensive, and people can't afford these goods because there is no cash and there is no money.
The ceasefire, part of a US-backed peace plan, was meant to pause 2 years of conflict and ease Gaza's humanitarian crisis. But despite pledges to scale up aid, deliveries remain far below what is needed for the territory's 2.3 million residents. Israel says it is meeting the required flow of 600 aid trucks a day and accuses Hamas of intercepting supplies, a claim Hamas denies. For families in Khan Yunis, survival remains the priority, as inflation, displacement and hardship overshadow hopes of recovery.
Now, the 15th National Games have officially begun with a grand opening ceremony in southern China, marking one of the nation's most significant sporting events. Held every 4 years and often dubbed China's Olympics, the Games bring together thousands of athletes from across the country. This year, the participation of representatives from Taiwan has drawn particular attention. Mahnur Maktoum has more from Beijing.
Chinese President Xi Jinping on Sunday inaugurated the 15th National Games of China, the country's premier multi-sports event at the Guangdong Olympic Sports Center Stadium in the south of China. The event, which takes place every 4 years, is often referred to as China's own Olympics, bringing together top athletes from across all provinces, autonomous regions, and municipalities, including participants from Hong Kong, Macau, and for the first time, representatives from Taiwan's Sports Association invited to engage in friendly exchanges. The 15th National Games will feature over 40 sports, more than 400 events, including traditional Olympic categories such as athletics, swimming, gymnastics, and basketball, as well as new additions such as esports, rock climbing, and skateboarding, reflecting the evolving interest of China's younger generation. Beyond serving as a showcase of athletic talent, the Games also function as a testing ground for potential Olympians ahead of future international competitions. Mahnur Maktoum, A News, Beijing.
Now we'll take a short break. Right after the break, we'll discuss the ongoing U.S. government shutdown deal, what this bipartisan push in the Senate means, and whether President Donald Trump will ultimately sign off to fully reopen federal agencies. Stay with us. Welcome back to A News. After weeks of political gridlock and frustration across the United States, there are finally signs of movement in Washington. The Senate has voted to advance a bipartisan deal aimed at ending the record-breaking government shutdown. The proposal passed its first hurdle with a 62-40 vote, but it still needs approval from the House and President Donald Trump before federal operations can fully resume. Joining us now from Matosinhos, Portugal, is political scientist Felipe Fernandes to help us understand the political dynamics behind this breakthrough and what may come next. Felipe, thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having me here with you.
Thanks. Felipe, what prompted this sudden shift in the Senate after weeks of stalemate?
So, the situation that we have currently is that we are already in the longest U.S. government shutdown in the own U.S. history. So we know it's a fairly usual tool, so for the opposition to block government action, so to say. But nonetheless, this one is very significant, being, as I just said, the longest in the U.S. history. So this Sunday night in the United States, the Senate advanced the funding bill to the House of Representatives, rather of 60 senators in favor against 40 who voted against it. And this marks definitely a major legislative step toward of this shutdown, even though this is definitely not guaranteed to, first of all, to pass within the House of Representatives, and secondly, to be passed in its own extent. What we are witnessing is still a back and forth of arguments between the Republicans and the Democrats. They are not aligned in what is the most important subject for the Democrats, that is the extension of the cities under the Affordable Care Act, so something related to health subsidies and support of people to attend public hospital, federal hospitals. And on the other hand, we have a very different position from the Republic, especially from the own U.S. President Donald Trump, who is trying to end the filibuster within the House of Representatives. And this would, in fact, when we are talking about efficiency, this would, in fact, be very efficient to end the government shutdown, as it would suspend this legislative tool that is used basically to delay a voting. So this would be effective. Nonetheless, we are witnessing a clear disruption between the Republican Party of senators and congressmen now that the bill is going to pass from the Senate to the House of Representatives. Congressmen who do not agree with President Trump and see that ending or suspending the filibuster would open a very sensitive precedent in U.S. politics. So as of now, we have a first major in this legislative process, with even Democratic senators aligning with the Republicans. So Democratic senators showing that they were willing to compromise within the Senate. But as I just said, there's absolutely no indicator that the same will and it is about at the House of Representatives. So what we are basically talking is, until the end of the year, it is like that the U.S. government will remain as it is as of now.
Felipe, how likely is President Donald Trump to sign the final version, given his previous stance?
It all depends on the outcome of the final version. So, of course, this is a legislative process. The signature by President Trump is the last step that makes a bill to turn into law, of course. What we are witnessing is that first and foremost, Donald Trump is the last person who is willing to compromise, the last person who is willing to concede its own political intentions in the name of having the bill approved in the House of Representatives, And that's fairly normal and fairly acceptable, since he is the head of state and the head of government. And so, of course, under these circumstances, where the Republicans still have and still remain with a political majority in both houses, it is fairly reasonable and fairly acceptable that the United States president is the one who's least willing to compromise. Of course, he's trying to play ball now with the congressmen, especially from the Democratic Party.
Mm-hmm.
The Democrats are not very well aligned. We have witnessed in the Senate 20, and so this could be a clear sign that. This could be a clear sign for minority leader in the House of Representatives to try to push for a majority within the Democratic Party, and especially because the minority leader, Mick Schumer, is a member of the Democratic Party, of course. So Donald Trump is probably not very eager to end the government shutdown unless the whole extent of the bill, if presented as a whole extent of a bill, is not perfectly aligned with his political goals and political intentions. And then again, fairly reasonable to do so.
Philip, also the shutdown has had major economic and social consequences. What impact do you see on public confidence in government institutions?
Yeah, of course, this could be a lot of tension within the public opinion, namely. So what we are witnessing is still federal workers that were either laid off or that are currently working without a pay. And so, of course, if we are talking about almost 1 million workers, we are talking also about their families, their parents, and their children being impacted. And so, of course, this could have a major political shift in public opinion. It all depends on what party is most successful in pushing its own narrative and to convince public opinion of its own narrative. So at the end of the day, we are ending 2025. And best case scenario is that the government will reopen, federal workers will be hired again, or will have their work paid off with their wages starting in January 2026. And we have midterm elections in 2026. So this could have a definite outcome from term elections next year.
Philip, what message does this situation send to U.S. allies and the broader international community?
I think that on a broader sense, the international community is I think it's commonly used to these government shutdowns. President Reagan had, if I'm not mistaken, close to half a dozen shutdowns in his 8 years term, double term of 4 years, of course, from 1980 to 1988. And so this is fairly common. I think that the international communities and the U.S. allies can still remain calm and passively watching this. We will have, nonetheless, a bigger problem if by the end of the year we do not have a reopening government, precisely because what we are witnessing here and at the moment is that most federal agencies, or some federal agencies, are already working with money that they had saved, with the emergency funds. And if we do not have a reopening in due time and in fair time, then what we are going to see is first the possibility of federal agencies having to go in depth to keep their services open. For instance, when it comes to the military service, or even worse than that, from a political standpoint, is that we could start to see some federal services collapsing. That would be a major for allies.
Thank you very much for your insights and for being with us. We greatly appreciate your time. Thanks a lot. After the break, we'll take a look at the key stories shaping the region. Stay tuned.
partnership with Azerbaijan will allow Israel also to enjoy some of the benefits.
What makes Azerbaijan a uniquely strategic partner for Israel?
Peace process with Armenia, which will bring more and more stability to both countries.
One of the key elements of that Donald Trump's Gaza ceasefire agreement is delivery of the humanitarian aid to Gaza.
More and more humanitarian aid entering Gaza from various checkpoints. We cannot allow a terrorist organization to sit on our borders.
It's often said the world never sleeps, but who's ready to wake you up with all you need to know about what is happening across the globe and in the region?
We are. Daybreak is live every morning, bringing you a complete wrap-up of the stories from overnight and all the news already happening in the world.
The biggest global headlines, the key regional developments, the must-read stories shaping the day.
We show them, we discuss them, we guide you through their meaning. We give you the news and a first look at the key headlines.
I'm Nadia Jani.
And I'm Lou Brown.
Join us, it's Daybreak here at A News.
Welcome back to A News. Now let's take a closer look at the key stories shaping the region. Peace talks between Afghanistan and Pakistan have collapsed. Both sides say a fragile ceasefire remains in place. The talks held in Istanbul last week were aimed at easing weeks of rising tensions along the border. Our correspondent Tamim Bahis has more from Kabul.
As talks between Afghanistan and Pakistan remained unresolved, Afghan official spokesperson Zabiullah Mujahid confirmed on Saturday that peace negotiations had failed, claiming Islamabad insisted that Afghanistan take responsibility for Pakistan's internal security, something Kabul says is beyond its capacity. Despite the breakdown, Mujahid stressed that the ceasefire has not been violated and will continue to be observed. In a statement, Pakistan's Information Minister Ataullah Tarar thanked Turkey and Qatar for mediating the talks, but said Afghanistan must uphold its counter-terrorism commitments. It stressed goodwill toward the Afghan people, yet vowed to oppose any Taliban actions harming regional stability and to protect its own security and sovereignty. The recent round of talks followed last month's deadly clashes between the neighboring countries. Meanwhile, Turkey is stepping up its diplomatic role. President Recep Tayyip Erdogan met Pakistan's Prime Minister Shehbaz Sharif in Baku on Saturday, expressing hope that the talks could still yield lasting stability. Erdogan also announced that Turkish Minister of Foreign Affairs, Defense and Intelligence will travel to Pakistan this week, part of a new trilateral push to secure a permanent ceasefire. In Kabul, senior Afghan Foreign Ministry official Shafi Azam told A News that Afghanistan remains genuine in wanting peace, but accused Pakistan of making unrealistic demands. For now, mistrust between the two neighbors runs deep. Turkey's next round of diplomacy could be the last chance to keep the fragile peace intact. Tamim Bahis in Kabul, A News.
Iranian President Masoud Pezeshkian has warned of a severe water shortage in the capital Tehran, and the Ministry of Energy has announced cutting Tehran's water supply at night as water shortage intensifies. Our Turaj Shiralido has more.
Iran's Ministry of Energy has started cutting the capital's water distribution at night in sections of Tehran's districts for 5 hours since midnight, after President Masoud Pezeshkian warned last week of worsening shortage across the country. The decision aims at preserving the dwindling reserves while the Iranian capital of estimated 10 million population is facing its severest water shortage in decades. Speaking at a conference, Pezeshkian urged the public to drastically reduce consumption, warning that if the critical water shortage continues, it would be rationed in Tehran next week, and also warned of possible evacuation of the capital if it worsens in coming months. According to official sources, water levels in Tehran's reservoirs have dropped by 40% since last year because of reduction in rainfall and the hike in demand due to the enlargement of the capital and its satellite towns, which reportedly use 1 billion liters of water per day. Ministry of Energy said that essential public services, including hospitals, will be exempt from the water shut-off, while the capital Tehran's water distribution system is experiencing an unprecedented stress of the last 60 years. President Pezeshkian also said that water shortage is a national issue and called for long-term plans to invest in wastewater recycling and desalination. Ministry of Energy has launched water-saving campaign, educating the public to fix leaks and stop watering gardens to reduce usage for at least 2 months. With an exception of northern provinces bordering the Caspian Sea, Iran's predominantly dry geography has contributed to the depletion of water reserves. Climate change and global rising temperatures are also adding to its water problem. Turaj Shiralilu, Tehran, A News.
Now, Kazakhstan's President Kassym-Jomart Tokayev is set to visit Moscow this week. Ahead of the trip, he held talks in the capital with Russia's first Deputy Prime Minister, focusing on trade, investment and key infrastructure projects. Our correspondent Fariza Kalimurzaeva has the details.
Ahead of his upcoming visit to Moscow, Kazakhstan's President Kassym-Jomart Tokayev met with Russia's first Deputy Prime Minister Denis Manturov at the Akorda Presidential Palace. The meeting focused on preparations for the state visit scheduled for November 12th. During the talks, both sides discussed key areas of bilateral cooperation and current economic developments. President Tokayev highlighted the goal of increasing trade turnover between the two countries to $30 billion. Russia remains one of the largest investors in Kazakhstan's economy, with total investments reaching $4 billion in 2024 alone. And the upcoming visit carries the status of a state visit, which includes official ceremonies and formal meetings. Meanwhile, Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov emphasized that the visit will be an event of international significance. Among the expected topics of discussion is the development of the North-South International Transport Corridor. Last year, nearly 2.5 million tons of cargo passed through Kazakhstan along this route, and the plan is to double its capacity by 2027. To fully unlock the corridor's potential and attract additional funding, President Tokayev proposed launching a joint program for investment and infrastructure support of the eastern branch of the corridor. And over the past months, the leaders of Kazakhstan and Russia discussed these issues by phone 3 times, and in total they have met 4 times this year. Also last year, Russian President Vladimir Putin made a state visit to Kazakhstan, during which a series of intergovernmental, interagency and commercial agreements were signed. Fariza Kalimurzaeva, Almaty, A News.
As Azerbaijan deepens its role in Eurasian transport routes, attention is shifting to the North-South Transport Corridor, a project connecting Russia, Iran and the Caspian region. Recent talks in Baku marked a step forward, but analysts say the project is also reshaping regional alliances and testing political trust, particularly with India.
As operational steps continue along the East-West Transport Corridor and the Zangezur Corridor, practical work is also underway to develop the North-South Transport Corridor and modernize its infrastructure. In October, Deputy Prime Ministers of Azerbaijan and Russia, along with Iran's Transport Minister, met in Baku, marking a key step forward. The parties agreed to deepen customs, border and logistics cooperation, establish a new working group and target an annual freight volume of 15 million tons. Among interested stakeholders, India has shown particular interest. The corridor offers New Delhi direct access to Russian and European markets, presenting significant trade opportunities. Yet for Azerbaijan, the issue is not only logistical, it is also a matter of trust and political alignment. Analysts emphasize that Baku probably has not forgotten India's hostile policy towards Azerbaijan, including arming Armenia and the Islamophobic approach of the Modi government. These factors make Azerbaijan cautious in its partnership decisions along the north-south transport corridor. This gives Azerbaijan real options to exclude India from the corridor, asserting control over a strategic trade route. India's stance has effectively isolated it from the Caspian region and the South Caucasus, reducing its prospects for cooperation with the regional countries. Meanwhile, relations with Pakistan are at their highest level in history. The Azerbaijan-Turkey-Pakistan trilateral format already plays a key role in regional politics, influencing not only defense but also logistics, energy and communications networks. Analysts also note that as Pakistan expands its regional engagements, including limited outreach to Armenia, and India remains absent from the north-south transport corridor, the geopolitical balance tilts in favor of Baku. This dynamic, they say, gives Azerbaijan greater diplomatic flexibility and bargaining power both regionally and globally. In this context, the north-south transport corridor is not just a transport route, it is a reflection of Azerbaijan's multi-vector policy, diplomatic agility, and economic independence.
Earlier, U.S. President Donald Trump discussed connectivity and transport corridor issues with Central Asian leaders during a summit in Washington. The talks touched on the development of the Middle Corridor, a key route linking Central Asia to Europe through Azerbaijan. Trump endorsed the Route for International Peace and Prosperity initiative, describing it as vital for boosting regional trade and stability. The leaders also agreed to deepen cooperation in critical minerals, energy, and logistics to expand U.S.-Central Asia economic ties. Georgia's latest diplomatic outreach is drawing renewed attention to its evolving foreign policy course. While the country continues to voice its commitment to European integration, its growing partnership with China signals a broader, more pragmatic strategy, one driven by trade routes, connectivity, and investment. As Tbilisi positions itself between competing global powers, the Prime Minister's visit to Beijing is being read as part of a deeper recalibration in how Georgia sees its role in the world. Our Nini Nikolashvili has more from Tbilisi.
Georgia is repositioning itself on the global map, not by choosing sides, but by trying to turn geography into a strategy. The Prime Minister's recent visit to China was not just about trade agreements. It was a statement of intent that Georgia wants to be more than a transit point. It wants to be an important link between the East and the West. This is part of a broader foreign policy recalibration. With the European integration process slowing and regional competition over new trade corridors intensifying, Tbilisi is seeking practical alliances to keep its economy expanding. China's Belt and Road initiatives gives Georgia a platform to do that, connecting the South Caucasus with Central Asia and Europe through the Middle Corridor. The government's economic message is clear. Investment will shape Georgia's next decade. Infrastructure, logistics, and energy are the chosen instruments, but this outreach also signals a new balance in Georgia's diplomacy, maintaining its Western aspirations while deepening cooperation with China, Azerbaijan, and Central Asian states that can make those trade routes function. Economy Minister Mariam Krivishvili says the policy now runs through every sector, from tourism to transport, from logistics to manufacturing. She called China Georgia's most important strategic partner, stressing that expanding these ties is part of a long-term national strategy, not a short-term political gesture. Nini Nikolashvili, Tbilisi, A News.
Now we'll take a short break. Right after the break, we'll discuss the emerging Azerbaijan-Turkey-Pakistan trilateral alignment and how it's reshaping regional power dynamics. See you shortly.
On World Business, we meet the boardroom leaders making market-moving decisions. And find out how leaders are dealing with continuous technological disruption.
Welcome back to A News. Baku hosted a trilateral meeting bringing together the leaders of Azerbaijan, Turkey and Pakistan, where the three sides reaffirmed that they stand united across political, military and economic platforms. The discussions also focused on expanding cooperation under the Azerbaijan-Turkey-Pakistan trilateral format, which has grown increasingly strategic over recent years. This comes at a time when Pakistan's relations with Azerbaijan are at their highest level, even as Islamabad continues diplomatic outreach in the region, including recent moves toward dialogue with Armenia, while India remains outside of this emerging alignment. Meanwhile, U.S. President Donald Trump has highlighted that what he calls the Trump route for international peace and prosperity, emphasizing the growing economic significance of Central Asia and expanding trade and mineral agreements with Washington. Central to these efforts is the Middle Corridor and the planned Zangezur Corridor, positioning Azerbaijan as a critical bridge between Central Asia, Europe and global markets. To help us unpack the geopolitical and economic implications, we are joined by Osama Rizvi, founder of Rizvi Insights from Lahore, Pakistan. Osama, welcome to the program and thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you so much for inviting me today.
Mr. Rizvi, how significant is this trilateral meeting in Baku for the Azerbaijan-Turkey-Pakistan partnership moving forward?
I'm very glad, even on a personal level, because I've been a proponent and supporter of Pakistan, focusing more on the Central Asian countries. I think finally we have started to move in the right direction. This agreement, this meeting, which builds upon a round of previous meetings and visits, both by the president of Azerbaijan to Pakistan and Pakistan's prime minister to Azerbaijan, it's building a base right now. And of course, Turkey, we have discussed this many times before, Turkey's role in the region is becoming important every day. So it's like an overseeing body that straddles both the worlds, wherein Pakistan and Azerbaijan both actually are in a position where they can have win-win agreements in terms of energy, in terms of defense cooperation, procurement, and etc. So it's pretty good.
Mr. Rizvi, we are now seeing Pakistan establish diplomatic ties with Armenia in coordination with Baku as well. How do you see that development feeding into Islamabad's broader regional diplomacy?
Once again, so it's if you look at the previous few months, or maybe 2025 starting, Pakistan have had some good diplomatic wins, such as the recent signing of a strategic defense agreement with Saudi Arabia, managing to rekindle our relationship with the US, inviting their investment in the mineral sector. So I think, and this recognition of Armenia, which by the way was done in consultation with Azerbaijan, there is no opposition on that end as well, feeds into the wider probability of Pakistan now assuming what is called a multi-vector foreign policy. And I hope we stay on that path.
At the same time, India remains outside of this trilateral dynamic. From your perspective, how does this shift influence regional political balances in South Asia and the broader Eurasian space?
Well, to have a detached view, we have to recognize India as one of the top 5-10 economic powers of the world, not only the region, but also on the other hand, if you look at it from the geopolitical end, this exclusion of India, which is essentially a key partner, a strategic partner of the US, speaks a lot about where the regional thinking is overall heading. So we see a more integrated, coalescing approach happening in Central Asia, South Asia, Southeast Asia, where led by China, of course, there a bloc is emerging. I mean, we are very far behind from this bloc reaching its potential in terms of trade and other figures, but a bloc and a thinking is emerging where these countries will see further cooperation amongst themselves. So the division, the Eastern Hemisphere and the Western Hemisphere will extend, actually.
Mr. Rizvi, Azerbaijan is increasingly shaping itself as a transit hub for Central Asia. How does Pakistan view the Zangezur corridor within its own connectivity ambitions, including China-Pakistan Economic Corridor?
So Pakistan, from a Pakistani perspective, you can view this corridor as an extension of CPEC, right, as a Western extension of CPEC. And, in terms of transit and some of trade, when we look at the countries, Azerbaijan, Pakistan, the trade potential is huge at the moment. $2 billion, but currently we're doing anywhere between $21 to $22 million bilateral trade. So I think it's a good, welcome thing for Pakistan, and I believe it can be used for energy cooperation and free movement of people and goods.
So turning to the U.S. vision, how do you interpret President Donald Trump's route for international peace and prosperity and its outreach to Central Asian economies?
Well, this relates to my previous answer where I told about how important this region is becoming. And naturally, when there is a region that is the fore, where there is lots of economic cooperation happening, especially as the Western world is also making a pivot towards the East because all the demand is going to come from this part of the world. The TRIP initiative speaks about this desire of the administration not to be left behind. So it's a very important development, and it only underscores the importance of this region.
Mr. Rizvi, looking ahead, how realistic is it to institutionalize the Azerbaijan-Turkey-Pakistan trilateral format into a structured regional platform, perhaps even similar to the Turkic states or ECO frameworks?
That's a very interesting thing because I've always been saying this on ad nauseum basis that we need to institutionalize our good relations with our neighboring countries and other blocs. So institutionalization is the goal, should be the goal, but of course, it's not very easy to do so. There needs to be economic cooperation frameworks to be put into contact, knowledge sharing agreements, capacity enhancement agreements. There needs to be a whole legally binding backing to the whole initiative, which takes time, but I think both of the sides are onto it. Both have good intentions towards each other. And sooner or later, this should happen. If not, then that would not be good.
And finally, what are the main risks or obstacles to deeper trilateral integration, and how can these be addressed?
Well, the first risk is, of course, the seriousness of the both sides and the willingness of the political and institutional leadership in both the countries. I think this is a golden chance. This is a critical juncture, and we need to jump. Second, of course, is the amount of investment and the lack thereof of cross-border or cross-country institutional frameworks, the one we just spoken about. And third, of course, a little bit about the geopolitical risks. This region, of course, remains prone to sudden geopolitical flashpoints, and that always will be one of the tail risks that we need to look for.
Osama Rizvi, thank you very much for talking to A News. We greatly appreciate your time. Thanks a lot.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
You are up to date with world news for the hour. Thank you for watching and stay tuned to A News.